What do you like? Tell me what you like.
I love the idea of nourishing both our body and our soul.
Welcome to the Nourishing You podcast presented by the National Association of Nutrition Professionals, NANP. We invite you to join Kristen Burkett and Diana Wally as they host experts from the holistic wellness space who will share practical tips and information to enhance your health and vitality. Kristen and Diana are master nutrition therapists and board certified in holistic nutrition with private practices that support their clients as they strive to reach their full potential. If you enjoy today's show, please help us out by commenting below, liking this video, and subscribing to the channel to help us spread the word.
You have to move your body.
That's my message. That's my passion.
This episode of the Nourishing You podcast is brought to you by Van Wagner Group.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to this episode of the Nourishing You podcast, focusing on maternal child health in a 3-part series. We started with Dr. Tom O'Brien with a deep dive into fertility, and today our focus is on pregnancy and breastfeeding with Amy Spindel. Amy Spindel is a master's level functional holistic nutrition practitioner focused on gut health and microbiome optimization. She also helps breastfeeding moms pinpoint the non-structural key contributors of their baby's reactions to breast milk. Certified in both applied functional medicine and microbiome analysis, she supports internal terrain rebalancing to promote enhanced nutrient digestion and absorption, hormones, mental health, and other aspects of whole body wellness. She owns a private practice that centers around children of all ages and women that are preconception through postpartum. She's additionally the team lead for scientific and clinical services at the School of Applied Functional Medicine. Welcome, Amy. We're excited to have you with us today.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm thrilled to be here.
Yeah, we're looking forward to this conversation for sure. There's such a need to support mothers-to-be for healthy babies, and we love that you focus on this population. So often women are told to simply take a prenatal vitamin without any other direction for their pregnancy, but you really get to the root of growing a healthy human, which is much more nuanced. So that said, can you give us a recap of your personal journey and how you came to this area of focus?
Yeah, absolutely. It all started with my son when he was born. I was previously a mental health practitioner and burned out and went to pastry school and was running a whole truffle line and it was delicious. But then my son was born and he ended up just very quickly showing us he had multiple food allergies, was waking up 4 to 8 times a night, very uncomfortable baby, and we couldn't quite figure out what was wrong with him. And I took him to multiple functional practitioners, integrative practitioners, holistic practitioners, and we would make a little bit of headway, but it wasn't quite solving the problem. And it got to the point where one doctor told me, well, he's just going to be on a $350 compounded multivitamin for life, and we don't really know why he needs that. And I threw my hands up and I enrolled in nutrition school. And a couple of years later, enrolled in a functional medicine program and finished them around the same time. And finally figured out what was going on with my son, which was fantastic, but also really, really loved this new area of work. And since then, I have just been digging in and just really appreciating and enjoying working with moms, but also understanding from my own experiences what they're going through and how frustrating it is to find those answers and get their children to stop struggling.
How's your son doing now?
He's doing great.
How old is he?
He's 11.
11.
And he's just thriving, which is so fun to see. And sleeping through the night, I have to add.
That's awesome. Well, Amy, we talk a lot about different chronic health conditions, which are primarily lifestyle driven, but it's interesting that the period of time that might have the biggest impact on our susceptibility to those conditions is actually preconception, pregnancy, and infancy, and it's not front and center to the conversation. So what do you think might be the greatest barriers here, and what's foundational that we're missing?
Oh, I think that's a really great question. I think nutrition, first and foremost, is one of the biggest barriers. I think women are just not taught how to eat very well. I've heard all too many times, oh, put on more calories, eat more calories during pregnancy. Just make sure you're having, some cheeseburgers and some milkshakes and you've met your caloric intake. Women are not necessarily educated on, well, here's a balanced diet. Here's what that looks like. Here are the types of foods that we can include in that. And then here is what we're aiming for specifically in pregnancy, especially the nutrients that are so well needed during pregnancy. A lot of the moms that I see, no one's ever talked to them about choline and how important that might be for spinal cord development and closing that neural tube. Maybe even more important than folate. A lot of moms are told, well, you need to get your iron up, but they're not actually taught how to go about doing that, what foods that they should be eating, and why it's so important. I mean, basically during pregnancy, we're eating to build baby's iron stores. That's what baby's pretty much going to be getting, because once we start breastfeeding that baby, iron transfers at such a tiny amount. So really, really crucial to plan for the whole pregnancy and get that really quality nutrition in throughout the whole pregnancy to prepare for when baby does get born. I think some of these other pieces too are just moms are living in toxic environments. I have had 6 moms this week alone who have some kind of mold history that's impacting their children. So looking at where those mycotoxins might be transferring through either during pregnancy or in breastfeeding, looking at heavy metals and heavy metal load, looking at mom's liver struggling, and it may not show up on their conventional lab work when they see their conventional practitioner, but just looking at different things that they're dealing with, like allergies, lets us know that maybe there's some liver pieces that we need to be working on, or blood sugar balance. And I find that blood sugar is a huge issue for a lot of these moms. And again, not really taught how to eat to stabilize their blood sugar, but also not taught how to relax and rest to also stabilize their blood sugar. So I think there's a lot of opportunities there. Another huge thing that I see is just the medication history for a lot of these moms. A lot of them have been on so many years of oral contraceptive pills. That impacts the microbiome. Combined with low fiber diets, they just don't have the proper microbiome to pass on to their babies, which just predisposes their babies to a whole slew of issues. So I think it is multifactorial, and that really just touches the tip of the iceberg.
Yeah. So you mentioned microbiome. Talk to us a little bit more about why the mom's microbiome might be important for that baby in terms of not only just creating the healthy human, but also to avoid like these chronic diseases later. How does it set the stage? Can you kind of walk us through that connection?
Yeah, absolutely. And just to even clarify before entering into this conversation, it's not just about the gut microbiome, which is what we so commonly hear about. Mom has, and all people have, multiple microbiomes throughout the body. The ones that we think are important for baby are the oral microbiome, the gut microbiome, and the vaginal microbiome. And with all of these microbiomes, they all interact with one another. The bacteria can float from the mouth into the gut and sometimes colonize in the gut. Some of the gut bacteria can colonize into the vaginal microbiome. So it really just depends on what's going on for mom, that different microbes may be more prevalent or less prevalent. And depending on that balance, we'll see different outcomes, different pieces. So with mom's microbiome, wanting it to have a high amount of bifidobacteria, let's say in the colon, because that helps to seed baby and set baby up. Babies are supposed to have a huge amount of bifidobacteria, but they don't get it unless mom is giving it to them, either through the microbiome passing on to them at birth, and more so for bifidobacteria during breastfeeding. The vaginal microbiome is so important because during birth, it's really, really acidic, and that helps to prevent pathogens from passing to the baby during birth. And so the combination of that very acidic vaginal microbiome exposure in combination with then early breastfeeding helps to really set the tone and seed the microbiome in a way that prevents as many pathogens as possible so that baby doesn't get sick. That's really the point there. And then from that, we can also start to see other issues that baby may present with coming from mom's unhealthy microbiome as baby starts to get older. We can start to see constipation issues. I see that quite frequently. And when I talk to the mom is also constipated nearly all the time. Looking at allergies, eczema, things like that, once the baby's born, it can be difficult to try to shift. But while mom is pregnant, there may be different levers that can be pulled, like certain probiotics to support reducing the risk there.
Yeah, that's what I was going to ask. So, and I have a follow-up question, but So what can mom do before pregnancy for her microbiome?
hmm No, I think that's a great testing. And I really encourage all of my clients that are knowingly preconception to start working on eating more fibrous foods. If they can't tolerate the fibrous foods, let's figure out why. Typically, it stems back to that microbiome. And for all moms coming in preconception, I really encourage them to start testing their microbiome so that we can see what bacterial mix is going on. Because once that mom is pregnant, we're no longer able to rebalance it in a way that can kill off really strong pathogens. We have to be so careful because those pathogens can release a lot of toxins into the body during the pregnancy. So if we're aware that there are things like parasites or really strong pathogenic overgrowths, we want to try to deal with that before pregnancy. So that then while mom is pregnant, we can continue to shape the microbiome using prebiotic foods, prebiotic supplements, and fibers from food. So that's really the goal, is to get started early.
Is it so if we're not able to do that before pregnancy, can we still make some shifts during pregnancy? Are there things that can be done, or is it just too late?
I am always an optimist. I think it just needs to be done very carefully and in conjunction with the woman's practitioner to make sure that everything feels like a safe thing to introduce. So what I mean by that is, different kinds of prebiotic fibers. I have a lot of my clients taking partially hydrolyzed guar gum because it's so wonderful at reshaping that microbiome, but it's very gentle and it's very low symptom, and it's not going to rock the boat, so to speak, too hard. Things like herbs and spices in food can be very microbiome shaping, but if we're only eating amounts that are found in food and not tincture form or encapsulated form, it tends to be a lot safer and we can be a lot more gentle. But it always comes down to discretion too of what is in the microbiome and how large a load is it, and how well is mom's liver functioning? Is she going to be able to keep up with clearing out any toxins that might be released in small amounts from any of that rebalancing? And of course, probiotics are always a nice, gentle way of supporting the gut as well.
So it sounds like you're optimistic, an optimist. I love that. So if a woman becomes pregnant, she still could do some gentle things to help her microbiome, but it might be better beforehand, before she gets pregnant, preconception, to maybe do some testing and make sure that things look good. So what about, I know that C-sections are more common than they used to be, and some are medically necessary, obviously. What downside, because you mentioned the vaginal birth, passing the bacteria to the baby, what are possible implications of a C-section to the microbiome?
Yeah, I think it's a fantastic question because the baby doesn't have that vaginal seeding and is not passing through that really acidic birth canal. And so what happens is those babies that are born via C-section have initial gut colonization that looks closer to a skin microbiome colonization versus a gut colonization. So just right off the bat, their microbiome has already started to shape in a different direction. It can get back on track through breast milk. Sometimes if babies are formula fed, then we can start to supplement in what's called human milk oligosaccharides, which is a prebiotic that can help feed certain strains. But the microbiome is still going to look a bit different for most of these children when there is C-section and, in addition, formula feeding. So if there is a C-section, one of the best things to do after that is to initiate breastfeeding for as long as possible. And I always suggest, because that is baby's initial, often antibiotic exposure. So thinking about testing the gut in about a month once the microbiome starts to settle down a little bit, and also testing mom's microbiome, because we know that so much of mom's microbiome, gut microbiome, will also transfer through the breast milk. So it's important to work with both at the same time and make sure that both are having beneficial bacteria in good abundant numbers.
You mentioned we talked about C-sections, how that could be an issue. So if a mom can't breastfeed, you said that there's something you can add to formula, some sort of I've never heard of that.
Yes, so it's becoming a little bit more widely known, and some of the formula companies are starting to catch on a bit. It's called human milk oligosaccharides, or HMOs. The ones that you supplement with are synthetic. So just in case anybody is a little bit spooked by the thought of human milk in a formula. So they are synthetic. There are over 200 naturally occurring ones in breast milk. The closest formulations that I have seen, doesn't mean there's others on the market, not some that I'm not aware of, but the closest formulations that I've seen contain about 5 different human milk oligosaccharides. So it is possible to supplement those. There's a really great company called Layer Origin, and they are one of the big manufacturers of these human milk oligosaccharides. And they have all kinds of blends for all different ages. So a really neat thing to look at. I would also consider at that point too, supplementing in some other prebiotic fibers as baby gets a little bit older, just to help continue to shape that microbiome depending on what is needed. So that might be things like galacto-oligosaccharides or fructo-oligosaccharides, depending on the age of the baby and what their microbiome is looking like.
Are there specific prebiotic, or actually, I meant to say probiotics for infants that are more appropriate for that age group? Because I hear a lot of women saying, "Oh yeah, well maybe I should give my baby a probiotic," but I'm sure like for the age of the baby, there's specific strains that are important, and some we probably don't want to introduce yet because they're not ready for it. So how do you guide women through that if they feel like that's a necessity?
I really appreciate you bringing this up because I see so much misinformation out there. We may actually be harming some of our babies' microbiomes if we choose the wrong thing. So I don't typically supplement probiotics directly into baby unless the baby's not breastfeeding, or if there is such a huge pathogenic overgrowth and the breast milk is not making a difference. That would be the only time I would supplement in a young baby, because all of the probiotics come with some kind of filler, some kind of excipient. It's not just the straight up probiotic strain. And babies' bodies are very little. Their kidneys, their liver still is not fully at capacity. And I don't want to introduce any of those extra pieces. So I'll try supplementing mom first and see if that helps to move the needle. As baby gets a little bit older, it becomes a little bit more safe to dose them directly with probiotics, but only if needed and only for short time periods. So I've gotten some clients in that they've started their baby on a probiotic from day one, and that was the advice of the pediatrician. And what this can actually do is harm the baby's immune system development. So we want a certain level of pathogens in the baby's gut. Typically, it's somewhere between about 1 to about 20% at any given time, although a little bit more can be normal for that age group as a newborn. That helps to train baby's immune system because the immune system starts to tag those pathogens as pathogenic bacteria. And it's really important to have that natural progression be there for that early immune system training. And we can start to see things like allergies, eczema later on when that appropriate training hasn't happened. When we're providing baby with probiotics too early, at too high a dose for too long a time period, and I'll also throw in there with the multi-strains that may not necessarily be appropriate for that age group, we are crowding out those pathogenic bacteria. And we may be crowding them out so much that baby's not getting any exposure to pathogenic bacteria, and they may be at 100% bifidobacteria, which can cause problems. So Bifido infantis is the predominant infant strain. That would be the one that I would consider supplementing directly if the needle is not moving from supplementing mom with probiotics. Excuse me, just as a type of gut reset for baby. And I would only do it for a few weeks. So maybe 2 to 3 weeks or so. And then I would retest the baby's gut. Because at that point, we should be seeing baby get back on track, especially if they're consuming breast milk because it's feeding those bifidobacteria. It colonizes incredibly easy in baby. And then baby will start to have the normal progression of microbiome development at that point.
Oh, interesting. Okay.
And yeah. And then how would a mom know that their baby's microbiome is off, their infant?
Yeah, another great question. So any baby that's born C-section or has had antibiotic exposure at birth should really be on the lookout for some microbiome dysbiosis. And I would say, just as a general rule, we take baby in for weight checks. We make sure that baby is growing appropriately. Let's also check the microbiome at 1 month and just make sure it's on track again.
When you say exposure to antibiotics, do you mean the baby directly, or could it be that the mom had antibiotics during pregnancy and that was an exposure?
It can be both, and it really just depends on mom's state of her microbiome, what supports mom may have put in at the time of that antibiotic exposure. So I think it's a really fair question. What I will say, though, is a lot of these children, not all, but a lot of them from a really early age are starting to display symptoms like they're reactive to mom's breast milk, or they have colic and it's really severe, or they're spitting up like crazy and they can't figure out why. I see a lot of these moms who have cut their foods down to 8, 9, 10 foods. And I had one mom, it was 8 foods and includes olive oil. So it's just these really, really dramatic dietary shifts to try to figure out why their infants are suffering. So I think that would be another really great clue to test the microbiome, any kinds of gastrointestinal symptoms. mucus in the stool, discolored stool, barely stooling, stooling constantly beyond that initial newborn phase. These are all some clues that maybe something that needs to be looked at there.
I think back to when my first kiddo, he was so colicky and had so many problems. And if I had known so many things back then that I know now, I would have done things different for him. I feel bad for how he, how his little tummy probably felt that whole time. And it didn't have to. But I love that moms are getting to listen to this now, or maybe even those that might become pregnant, because really that's kind of where the magic is. If someone is wanting to have kids, how soon before that trying to get pregnant stage do they need to start thinking about this? Because what I find quite often is I have clients come to me saying they're ready to get pregnant and they want help to get pregnant. Like maybe they're having fertility problems, or maybe they're saying, yeah, I'm ready to get pregnant and I want to make sure I'm eating right. But once that's in somebody's mindset, there's no backing out of that. So I can't ever get somebody to say, well, could you maybe wait 6 months to try so that we can do some work to build you up beforehand? It never fails. Within 2 months, they're pregnant, and, it just doesn't work that way. So before the bees in the bonnet to getting pregnant, how far in advance do you think it would be reasonable for a woman and the potential dad to start looking at their microbiomes? And do you ever talk to clients about the sperm contributor to the whole process and their microbiome and how that impacts?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a great point. I was just talking to somebody yesterday doing the intake, and dad had a horrible, horrible vaccine reaction where he had hives for 6 months, and the baby was conceived during that time, and he was on a ton of medications, and the child is really struggling. That's the identified client. And, what's running through my mind that I'm not saying to this family is, well, I wonder how sperm health played into some of this. What I really encourage my clients is when they are willing to wait and spend the time investing in themselves and their own health. And I frame it as, I want you to have as healthy a pregnancy and as easy a pregnancy as possible. A lot of them have also had a first child where things did not and are not going so well. And that's why I'm working with them to start with. So wanting to avoid some of those problems, asking if they can wait a bit, and really wrapping up the work 3 months before they try to conceive so that there is time for the eggs and the sperm to really become great quality. That's not always possible. Sometimes, though, it is. And those are the cases I really have fun with, because then we can really dig in incredibly deeply, clear out mycotoxins, clear out toxic metals, work on the microbiome, get everything situated, boost up the nutrition to a great level where they can support that pregnancy and go right into breastfeeding if they want to. That would be ideal.
Yeah. I mean, I think it's so important because I think we kind of think about, well, our moms didn't do that and our grandparents didn't have to do that. They just got pregnant when they were ready, and things, for the most part, were fine. But we live in a very different world than what they grew up in, and our microbiomes are not the same. Our environmental exposures are not the same as what they had. We're bombarded so much more. So our systems are not in the same starting place as, our moms and grandmas were when they got pregnant. So I think it's something, I wish we could find a way to get to young women earlier and help educate about how important this is to get on top of things beforehand and take more stock in doing that, put more effort into like pre-pregnancy preparation. If we could make that a thing versus just healthy pregnancy, we really need pre-pregnancy planning so that we can have healthy babies and healthy humans going forward.
I couldn't agree with you more. And, it's so interesting that you're referencing this piece about, yes, like the microbiomes have shifted over time. I was reading one paper, and newborn and early infant stool is a lot more alkaline than it used to be 100 years ago. And what that means is the microbiome composition has shifted, because the baby's gut should be really, really acidic from all of that bifidobacteria. And we are seeing that moms are giving birth to babies with lower and lower amounts of bifidobacteria, which is leaving them more susceptible to infections. I believe that I heard a statistic that about 30% of moms now don't have bifidobacteria to pass on to the babies. It's about 30% of babies are being born without the bifidobacteria colonizing.
It's a huge statistic, especially
Yeah.
with how important that strain is for our babies. Huh.
Yeah. That's why we're excited to have you, Amy. If you'll indulge me, you might find this interesting. So the reason why I got into this work years ago was my second daughter was born with, shortly after birth, terrible eczema. I mean, like the bleeding, I'm sure you see this in your work, the bleeding, constant itching. She couldn't sleep. And that was back before, I don't even think the internet was brand new, but there was nothing on it. It was really difficult to find any help. Luckily we did. She's fine. She's thriving now. But I did, because that's how I got into this work, similar to you, I did work with families a long time ago. And I can tell you, just to kind of back up your anecdotes, that when I would work with somebody preconception on their nutrition, and we didn't know as much about the microbiome then, but at least on their nutrition, and seeing them go through a healthy pregnancy and have healthy babies, it is the most satisfying, beautiful work. So thank you for what you're doing. It's really beautiful work, and my practice has shifted. So now I work with, people my age and older, but I won't tell you how old that is, but.
But you know what, Diana, what you're saying is so interesting. We didn't know as much about the microbiome then, but when we think about even now, like, what are our fundamental steps to help create a healthy microbiome? It starts with nutrition, right? Like, that's the basics. If we're not feeding our gut microbes good, healthy whole foods with lots of colors and fibers, we're not going to have a healthy gut no matter what we do. So even for people that don't have that opportunity to work with somebody to do a microbiome test and to do all this, deeper work, just getting their nutrition into a good balanced place with as much healthy whole food and avoiding those ultra processed foods, like, that's fundamental, and that will shift it as much as anything else. So you were doing the work back then. You just didn't see the numbers on the papers for the microbes and how they were changing.
That was not a thing. And I'm excited to talk about the food piece with Amy. And Amy, I think you said your physician suggested a $350 vitamin or something. Yeah, so we went to a specialist, a pediatric dermatology specialist, and I didn't really want to go, but there weren't a lot of alternative practitioners or things to go to. And she wanted to prescribe a cream that my daughter was going to have to be on in perpetuity, and said, now, if you start, doing research on this, it's going to say it is linked to lymphoma, but the research isn't really conclusive. And my husband looked at me and he was like, let's get out of, like, what? Really? Here's some lymphoma cream for your baby. I mean, I don't know what to say about that, but anyway.
I mean, I'm so grateful we have other options now. And
we have you
around things, but right, it was so limited. And I feel like a lot of moms are still so limited in that conventional mindset of, when the only tool is a hammer, everything's a nail. That's what's available.
Van Wagner Group specializes in tailored insurance solutions and risk management services for nutrition professionals and a broad range of healthcare professionals, including psychologists and clinical supervisors. With their extensive expertise, they are committed to helping you navigate the complexities of your profession, ensuring that you can focus on what you do best, supporting the health and wellness of your clients. Van Wagner has been providing comprehensive insurance solutions to the healthcare, mental health, addiction treatment, and counseling fields for over 35 years.
That's true. Well, whether we have the opportunity to look at the microbiome in detail or not, and whether it's before pregnancy or during pregnancy, we know that there's certain foods, nutrients that are especially important for the development of the microbiome, for balancing it, and just nutrition for supporting the mom and the growing baby. So maybe we can spend a little bit of time on that, because that's really dear to all three of our hearts as nutrition professionals.
Yeah, I love that. I always tell my moms that we're actually eating for three. So we're eating for ourselves, we're eating for our baby, but we're also eating for our gut microbes. And so when they start to think about it that way and realize it is so important, I think it can really help to motivate these dietary shifts. As you mentioned earlier, one of the best things is just cleaning up the diet and trying to get out as many omega-6 fatty acids or inflammatory refined oils as possible, getting in more of those omega-3 fatty acids, which are just so soothing and nourishing to the gut, really looking at as many fibers as possible and getting in at least 29 grams of fiber per day. And I would say that is a bare minimum for any healthy microbiome, and from a variety of sources. So thinking about lots of different fruits and vegetables and letting color guide us towards what looks good and is vibrant and really just nutrient rich. Thinking about whole grains as well, whether or not gluten is in the diet, just making sure that all of the grains are whole. Because again, the color signifies health and nutrients. And so if we can get colorful whole grains, that really just adds more support to the gut microbes.
Give us some examples. Let's talk about maybe some vegetables and colors that maybe aren't always on people's list, and whole grains that you're referring to. Like, does that mean like the bread that says whole grain bread is as good as something else? Or let's skip nitty gritty for a minute.
Well, maybe Amy could take us to the grocery store.
Yeah, that would be fun. You could just walk around with the cart and just put all the good stuff in.
Yeah. What would you put in your cart?
Yeah. So thinking about especially the wonderful foods that the microbes love coming from fruits, the microbes love colorful berries, and especially the red berries. They really feed a lot of those beneficial bacteria and really support this concept of a lower pH in the gut gets rid of pathogens. So even if that's the only thing that's available to somebody to help to change their gut, eating lots of red fruits. So that might be the pomegranate ear rolls, that might be cranberries if they're in season or frozen, blueberries, strawberries, even red skin grapes. And I tell my clients if they can find the grapes with the seeds in them, the microbiome loves that, especially some of the microbiome members that help to control healthy blood sugar. So that could be a really nice one to add in.
So you're saying eat the seeds in those grapes?
Yeah, if you can. If you can find non-seedless grapes. Dragon fruit is another really great one for the microbiome. Mango is another great one. And I love those, and the green kiwi, because those are really great for encouraging bowel motility. So especially for my mamas that are constipated, getting those pretty regularly into the diet can be really helpful. Looking at like different vegetables, onions and garlic and the crucifers. So things like broccoli, cauliflower, arugula, Brussels sprouts, kohlrabi if it's in season, kale, cabbage. All of those are really great for promoting beneficial bacteria, but they're also really liver supportive. And because we have so much estrogen in pregnancy, it'd be really helpful to just have some of those to support the liver. Speaking of the liver, bitter foods can be a really nice add there. Things like sesame seeds, tahini, different bitter greens to really just stimulate digestive juices. Dandelion tea might be a nice add there as well. And then microbes like those too. Onions, garlic, lots of spices. Turmeric is a great one because it can really support beneficials while reducing pathogens. Garlic is another one that supports beneficial bacteria and helps to reduce the pathogens. Any of the spices that come from more the Mediterranean area can help to do that. So thyme, oregano, they have really great medicinal qualities. So it can be really nice to just sprinkle that into the food on a regular basis and just support the microbiome that way. With the whole grains, I actually like my clients to cook them whole and not have them processed. So less on the pastas, less on the breads, just because we want to keep a nice low in range blood sugar for moms while they're pregnant. It's really important to prevent birth complications. And blood sugar during pregnancy should actually ride a little bit lower than it does during non-pregnant moments. So that helps to support it. So looking at cooking whole grains, things like oatmeal, not the instant oats, but your whole rolled oats or the Irish oatmeal, steel cut. Things like millet or brown rice or the beautiful forbidden black rice, or I know it's a seed, but even wild rice can be a nice add on there. Quinoa, soaked and sprouted if possible. I know not every mama has time to do all of that prep work, but just makes the nutrients so much more accessible. And then I absolutely love beans, nuts, and seeds as parts of the diet too. Not just for fiber, but the beans really help to feed some of the beneficial bacteria in the gut. And especially for the moms that are dairy free, The beans have galacto-oligosaccharides in them, which is predominantly found in dairy products. And this helps to feed some of the microbes, the beneficial microbes. So that can help keep that microbiome in balance. And of course, the nuts and seeds, just, again, a little bit more fiber, a little bit more colors and polyphenols, and just a whole lot of vitamins and healthy fats.
Right.
Making me hungry.
I know.
Oh, that's so good.
Heart is full.
Do you have specific protein recommendations for your pregnant moms? You have
Really?
guidelines there?
Yeah, I really just aim for them to try to eat a variety, fish at least twice a week from the oily fish grouping. So salmon, halibut, herring, mackerel, anchovies. Am I missing a smashed fish? I can't remember. I went out of order there. If they can't get the oily fish in, then I suggest things like walnuts and chia seeds every day, because that can help support the omega-3 intake, or a nice algae oil. And then just a range of other animal proteins as they can. So iron obviously is one of the wonderful things that we can get from our animal proteins, but more of the dark meat ones and the red meat ones. So like chicken legs, chicken thighs, dark meat poultry in general, and then, red meat, lamb, those types of foods. And I really encourage them to eat on the higher range of protein. So towards about 100, 120 grams roughly, just to make sure that they're meeting their needs and trying to reduce risk of preeclampsia.
And then I would love to circle back to blood sugar just for a quick minute.
Yeah.
So you had mentioned how important it is to balance blood sugar during pregnancy. And I'm assuming this is because of the risk of gestational diabetes, that sort of thing. Is that on the rise? Are we seeing more blood sugar issues in pregnant women?
I don't know statistically, but I know in practice I'm seeing it pretty frequently.
Okay.
But I'm also seeing it in women preconception and women in between pregnancies. And I just feel like elevated
So they
blood
come in, I'm sorry to interrupt. So they come to you and they already have prediabetes or something like that. Interesting. Okay.
Right. Or they're at least trending towards prediabetes, or we're seeing a lot of spiking, and it may not be registering yet as prediabetes, but I request my clients to obtain fasting insulin tests where they're able to. And that can be a really good indicator of if trouble is brewing, but the body is just doing a really good job responding to some of those higher blood sugar spikes with a higher surge of insulin. So we're not really seeing it reflected yet in the A1C.
And that can cause then complications with the pregnancy down. Okay.
And with birth. So baby might be really big, might get caught. It increases the risk of C-section. It increases the risk of shoulder dystocia. So the more that moms can do earlier on, there's some good evidence. And I can't remember the exact A1C off the top of my head. I apologize. But Lily Nichols is doing a lot of work around this. And there is a certain A1C number where I think it's about 95% predictable of gestational diabetes by the third trimester. So if moms can even do this in the first trimester, they'll start to have a really great sense of, okay, here's what I really need to focus on right now. Here's what the priorities are.
Yeah. So, and diet's absolutely first there. And so protein to stabilize that blood sugar is important.
Right.
And keeping all of those ultra processed foods down as much as possible. But, the other thing I'm seeing with a lot of my clients related to blood sugar that isn't really taken into consideration, I think, by a lot of people, is the effect of stress on their blood sugar.
Yes.
And you've got moms that are working, or not moms, but women who either are wanting to become pregnant or early pregnancy, and they're still working and they're trying to do all the things, or they were having a hard time getting pregnant and they're stressed about it, and just life and how it is. And if we can start working through stress management and stress resilience, that's a huge piece to keep blood sugar in check through pregnancy too.
Yeah, those tools and skills are really, really important, because especially if it's very hard for moms preconception and in early pregnancy, throwing in a newborn into that mix really can be challenging. So if they have those tools to start pulling out in that newborn stage or return to work stage or whenever that may be, it can be so nice to just have that to fall back on, because it's already become a habit.
Yeah. I think we have a very anxious society, right now. And so that regulation is really important. And I think even just recognizing it, like so many people just refuse to recognize how it's affecting them, or because you just you think it's your normal. You get used to it being your normal rather than seeing it as an additional layer that doesn't need to be there. That's putting stress on your system. So.
I agree. And I think too, society is just so on the go. I mean, this is kind of funny, but you know what I found on Amazon? There is a tray that clips onto your steering wheel so you can eat while you're in your car. And then there is a dip holder that goes onto your air vents.
No.
Dip your chicken nuggets while you're sitting in the car running in between the meetings or wherever you need to be.
Well, maybe just touch on that a little bit because, we can't digest when we're in that kind of a state, but maybe I think that's a great principle to even put up here because we know like in pregnancy, digestion is difficult anyway, and moms get reflux and all kinds of issues. So can you talk a little bit about why that's not a good idea?
Yeah, no, exactly. We really want to be in a place where our body is wanting to rest and digest. And when we're in the stressed mode, our body's not going to prioritize that rest or that, sending blood to the digestive tract to break down our food. It's really prioritizing survival because our body doesn't know the difference between, oh, there's a lion chasing me down and it's about to eat me. I better get moving versus I have 3 minutes to choke down this entire meal and I better get going. And then I have to run into this meeting and I'm not prepared for the meeting. And then I have to give this, whatever, big presentation in front of all these people. And I'm already really stressed about it. They're not going to be able to break that food down. That's when we really start to see people with reflux or diarrhea or even constipation at times, gas, bloating, just because they are eating so fast and they're so stressed out while they're trying to consume their food.
Yeah.
So the more that we can do to not be in that state of mind, I think the better, so that we do have a better chance of breaking down those nutrients and not having digestive distress at the other end of it.
Right. Well said. Yeah. I have one more food question I just thought of. So for a new mom out there that decides to introduce food to her baby, what are some great first foods for microbiome health and just overall health for the baby?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. There's so many different theories about it, which is why I'm pausing. From a microbiome perspective, I really like to start slowly, gently introducing different kinds of resistant starches and different kinds of just fruits and vegetables in general, really leaning towards more of the vegetables to get more of that savory palate in place because breast milk is so sweet. They're used to those sweet flavors. And when I say resistant starches, moms are going to love this tip because it makes life easier during the week. Certain foods, when we cook and cool them, become really, really wonderful foods for very specific gut bacteria that help to control that pH in the gut, which helps to keep those pathogens down. So some of the foods that can become resistant starches are those beans I was talking about. So I love lots of different variety of beans in the diet, lentils, also potatoes, sweet potatoes, a lot of our whole grains. So moms can make a big batch at the beginning of the week, cool it down in the fridge, and then just pull it out as they need it through the week. It's already done. And then they're having that added benefit of getting those really nourishing resistant starches in to also support their gut bugs and support their baby's gut bugs. Because around the time when babies are starting solids, their microbiome really starts this progression towards an adult gut. They'll hit that adult gut by about 2.5, 3 years old if mom has weaned down on breastfeeding by that point. But even if not, it really starts to shift in favor of these foods that are now coming in because they have to be able to break them down and then turn those fibers that are coming in into other byproducts that serve different functions within the gut. So, I mean, we have this whole wonderful piece here of what are we feeding our baby and then how is it impacting baby's gut as first foods. Now, if baby has a lot of gut dysbiosis, a lot of gut issues, it may look a little bit different with the introduction, just kind of depending on what's going on. Sometimes we want to put in things that are more like bone broths or egg yolks and marrow and get a little bit more of that fattier foods in to really do some intensive gut healing right at the beginning. So, that'll kind of depend on what's happening. Sometimes we'll delay introducing solids if we know that there's some pretty specific work that we need to do with the bifidobacteria first, if the baby's a little bit older at that point. So we might delay it a month or two, get that work under the belt so that the gut can progress through the stages as it normally would, and then pull in those solids a little bit later. So it really just kind of depends a bit on the baby, but regardless, we want really just whole, dense, nourishing foods, simple things that our grandparents would recognize as foods. And then, one thing at a time at first, and then starting to bring in blends of things. The other thing I like to just add is looking at some of those allergenic foods and making sure to get those in within the first, 6 months of getting solids, maybe a year of getting solids at the outset, because that helps to actually prevent food allergies in some kiddos. So between 6 and 12 months, things like eggs and peanut butter and cow dairy and gluten-containing grains and all of the rest of that. and then continuing to rotate them
And that's
through.
kind of shifted over time, because I think for a while they were saying, don't introduce those because it might create an allergy. But I think we've learned a lot, from that time. And
Yeah, we now know different, and we now know that if we can get them in early, and I mean, some of the research has been done on 3 and 4 month old babies to get these foods in early, but I and the World Health Organization are really of the opinion that that's way too early. So that's why 6 months, because at that point, the gut barrier starts to close up a little bit naturally. And so just bringing in the solids at that point at 6 months is just a bit more appropriate for microbiome development purposes. And we still get the benefits of bringing in those allergenic foods within the first 6 to 12 months of eating solids. So
It's such a fun time. I just was thinking as you were talking about picturing my children in their high chairs, and they loved avocado. That was one of the first things that we did, and sweet potato. Just being like in their hair and like, it's just such a fun time. It's so cute.
definitely.
Okay, so as we get toward wrap up, this has just been so good and so much practical information that I think all the moms and dads are going to love this. So tell us about you personally, Amy. So how do you incorporate the principles of microbiome health into your own life, your family's life? Give us kind of a day in the life.
Yeah, I mean, I really try to have as many whole foods as possible. Try to get at least 40 fruits and vegetables in per week.
40.
Yep. I can't say that my kids go for it, but I certainly.
now, do you include spices and herbs in that count?
Yeah. So those are.
Okay.
So I definitely include those, which helps. But also, if you have a yellow onion and then you have a red onion, that's 2 foods. If you have a lettuce blend and there's 4 different lettuces in your blend, that's 4 foods. So you can really kind of play with it, and it shouldn't be too inaccessible for most people to eat, right? Like frozen bag of veggies, frozen bag of mixed fruits. You can get it in fairly easily that way. So it's just that variety in small amounts is a really great and easy thing to do. I do a lot of smoothies in my house too, because then I can put in different fruits or veggies. My kids have caught on though, especially the older one. So sometimes I'll do more powder blends that have some of those foods in there, and cocoa powder covers everything, which is great. Cocoa powder is another really great food for the microbes, so I don't mind putting it in there. We do our fair share of chocolate that way. And really just trying to be mindful of limiting the amount of animal proteins and the amounts of fats in our diet, because we know that fibers are more beneficial to our gut microbes. And then what we do just kind of as a regular checkup, and we're actually due for this now, it reminds me, is just about annual stool test to just make sure that our microbiomes are still on track. We do a lot of herbal medicines instead of antibiotics, but on the rare occasion that antibiotics are needed, I definitely work on following that up pretty regularly to just make sure we're getting everything back on track, get those pathogens back out, and make sure that the microbiome restores itself. So those are all some of the things that my family does in practice.
Nice. Yeah. I know. I just did my annual GI test myself. So
which one do you use?
I use Diagnostic Solutions.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. The GI map. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. The joys of our job, talking about. Yeah.
Totally.
And then it made me laugh when you were talking about your children, maybe not so much on the 40 different varieties, but joys of having a mother that's a nutritionist, right?
I have one kid that will maybe eat 3 or 4 fruits or vegetables a day, and I have another one that will eat everything I'm eating. So it just, it varies.
Kristen and I talk about, because our children are older adults, and they do come around, they'll send us pictures of like an awesome meal that they made, or so they will come around.
But there's hope.
We went through some, tricky times. There was revolt at the Wally household for a period of time.
So this has been just a great conversation. Thanks so much for being willing to share your information with us, and we're excited to share you with our audience. And I think it's just been a great topic.
Yeah, really practical. So wonderful. We appreciate you so much, Amy. Thank you again. And thank you to all of our listeners. We really appreciate you tuning in, not turning in, I hope, tuning in. And until next time, be well.
This episode of the Nourishing You podcast is brought to you by Van Wagner Group. To learn more about Van Wagner Group, visit vanwagnergroup.com. Don't miss a beat. Find other episodes and subscribe to this podcast on YouTube, or check us out on your favorite streaming app. Now available on Apple Podcasts, Pandora, Spotify, iHeartRadio, Amazon Music, and more. You can also visit nanp.org for more information. Looking for a board-certified holistic nutrition professional to support you on your health journey? Go to nanp.org to get started today. Membership in the NANP provides you with a competitive advantage. Whether you're a current practitioner or a student, we want you to become an active, informed leader of the holistic nutrition community and join our association today. When you're ready to go a step further, you can boost your credibility by becoming board certified in holistic nutrition. Visit nanp.org today to apply. The information on the NANP podcast is for educational purposes only and should not be considered medical or legal advice. The NANP is not liable or responsible for any harm, damage, or illness arising from the use of the information contained herein. By listening to the information on this podcast, you agree to defend, indemnify, and hold harmless the NANP and all agents. Copyright NANP, all rights reserved. Until next time, stay nourished.